Thank you, Council Member Gossett, and thank you to all Council members for this wonderful proclamation celebrating our Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. I'm very honored to receive the proclamation today on behalf of our community. Our history in this country is long, with Filipinos settling around 1750 in what later became Louisiana. Asian Pacific Americans have served in every major conflict since shortly after the War of 1812, died on the battlefield at Gettysburg defending the Union, and have been recognized with medals of honor for bravery defending our nation. Despite our service to the country, our history here, though, has been one of exclusion, family separation, labor exploitation, racial profiling, detention on a massive scale, and abrogation of our constitutional and human rights, unfortunately, to this day. American immigration policy began with the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, the original travel ban, and expanded to eventually bar the rest of Asia. At a time when 35 to 40 million Europeans were arriving in America, Asia was restricted to an annual quota of 150 immigrants. Contract laborers would be recruited from Asia for hard work in the fields, forests, fisheries, factories, and mines, but they could not bring their wives and families and were denied citizenship and its protections. In King County, Asian Pacific Americans, as Councilmember Gossett said, developed fields, helped log the forests, labored in fisheries and factories, and helped to develop the backbone of our economy. Boeing's first aeronautical engineer, Wang Zhu, was Chinese. The Chinese railroad workers built the transcontinental railway, and today's Chinese and other Asian software engineers are building today's super information highway. In 1965, new legislation finally eliminated racial quotas, and Asians could immigrate in larger numbers. Nevertheless, due to our now broken immigration system, families are still separated for years and decades, waiting to reunite with family members here. Driven by immigration, Asian Pacific Americans are now the fastest growing racial group in the nation and in King County. There are more immigrants from Asia to the United States than from any other region in the world. Asian Pacific Americans are 17% of King County's population. The President's executive orders related to immigrants and refugees affect our community. The anti-immigrant, anti-refugee, anti-Muslim sentiment behind these executive orders are a clear threat to our immigrant, refugee, and Muslim families and the South Asians who are often mistaken for Muslims and are racially and religiously profiled and detained at our nation's airports. The xenophobic, racist, and Islamophobic rhetoric in our current political discourse is contributing to a climate of hate, spurring hate crimes against many racial and religious groups, most notably, but not exclusively, Muslims and people of color. South Asian members of our community have been shot and killed, and a Sikh member of our community in King County shot as well by shooters saying they did not belong in our country. Calls for Muslim registry and ban in the name of national security recall the mother of all executive orders, the World War II Executive Order 9066, which led to 120,000 innocent Japanese Americans and their immigrant parents being racially profiled, rounded up, and sent to American concentration camps under the banner of national security. The first Japanese Americans forced from their homes were from King County. There are over 1 million undocumented Asians and Pacific Islanders in our country who would be affected by the provisions to vastly increase deportations. Southeast Asians and other Asian Pacific American families with undocumented family members, like our Latino and African counterparts, have been torn apart. Perhaps for all these reasons, Asian Pacific Americans from King County have stood up through our history for civil and human rights. Born in King County, Gordon Hirabayashi defended the constitutional rights of all Americans when he challenged the United States government's World War II forced removal and incarceration of Japanese Americans. He was incarcerated in King County Jail before being sentenced to a federal prison. Over 40 years after his conviction, the Ninth Circuit overturned his conviction. The Seattle Japanese American Citizens League originated the successful national fight for redress for Japanese Americans. Nemesio Domingo, his brother Somi Domingo in Seattle, and Gene Viernes of the Alaska Cannery Workers Association joined with Tyree Scott of the United Construction Workers and local leaders of the United Farm Workers to form LILO, then known as the Northwest Labor and Employment Law Office in Seattle, and won class action lawsuits challenging plantation-like, racially segregated and unequal working conditions in the canneries. When Somi and Jean were assassinated in Seattle at the behest of the Marcos regime for their labor organizing and anti-Marcos activities, the Committee for Justice for Domingo and Viernes, led by Cindy Domingo, successfully took on the Marcos dictatorship for these murders. Today, the Japanese American, South Asian, and Muslim communities in King County and throughout the country join with other Asian Pacific American communities and the American mainstream against racial and religious profiling. Asian Pacific American attorneys were at the nation's airports to defend the rights of passengers facing the Muslim travel ban. Asian Pacific Americans were historically active in the civil rights movement, and young Asian Pacific Americans make the links between the Black Lives Matter movement and the need for all communities to stand with the Black community in demanding justice and police accountability. Our Asian Pacific American community has faced discrimination through the years, but we have a proud history of resistance. This month, we celebrate that history and commit to building on it in facing today's daunting challenges. Our resistance is part of a larger movement for justice and human rights, not only here in King County and the United States, and not only in May, but a movement for social justice working for a more equitable and peaceful world for all. Thank you again to our King County Council.
And thank you, Diane. Diane and I would be privileged and honored if all of you would join us for a picture.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2. All right, got it. Thank you.